So now we're going to move on and just talk about the planets. So the planets are all of these things. They are energies. They are archetypes. So what does that word mean, archetype? So this was coined by Carl Jung, right? The first depth psychologist, who came up with this idea that there are these characters that live within us. Not only are we all, each of us as individuals, made up of a number of different characters, but we as humanity share a collective mind where these characters hang out. And they show up in our individual lives and they show up in our collective lives. So that's the idea of archetypes, are these inner characters that are shared by all of humanity, but that also show up as aspects of the self. The characters and voices that we find within us, the inner critic, the inner child, those are examples of archetypes, these voices that are inside all of us. So the planets represent raw energies working in the world. They represent archetypes, voices within, and characters that are shared by all of humanity. They represent goddesses and gods. In Western astrology, the planets are given the names of Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. And because this is Western culture, that is where our archetypal roots lie. And those are the characters through which we get to know the planets. So the goddesses and gods don't entirely contain the planetary energies, but they begin to give us the cultural hints and tips as to how to get to know that complex underlying energy. So energies, archetypes, goddesses and gods. Inner voices, we talked about that a little bit. When I read a natal chart, I'm always thinking about the planets showing up for the client as all the different either unified or conflicting voices within. Also, psychological forces. So we think about, in the natal chart, sometimes we talk about the moon as representing the mother. The moon also represents the feeling heart. The moon represents emotions. The moon is the Roman goddess Luna. So we see how the planets can fit into each of those places. And within ourselves, our natal moon talks to how we nurture ourselves, what our relationship was like with our mother. Sometimes the moon can be that voice of our mother that we still hear in our head, or other maternal and nurturing or destructive voices that we hear that have that maternal nature. And I could go on, but that's just to give you an example of what I mean by inner voices and psychological forces. So the planets are also mythical and legendary characters. We don't have to go all the way back to Greek and Roman mythology to find these characters or archetypes in our lives. They show up in pop culture. They show up in our celebrities and in our world leaders. These are essential human characters that show up all over the place. And we're going to look at that when we look at each individual planet. Cultural icons, right? These are the archetypes and energies that we project onto those real human beings that hold space as celebrities or as cultural icons. And underneath all of that, these planets represent these mysterious cosmic forces that allow our souls to develop and grow. Bottom line for me, what astrology is, it's a map of the soul's development. So all of these things are true about what the planets are. And in essence, what I believe is that these are the forces that guide us to grow and learn on a soul level. So by listening to and aligning with all of these different energies and voices through the planets, we learn to be the very best of each of those in our individual lives. So they're also teachers and mentors and hidden selves to aspire to. Okay, so this is Neptune. This is Neptune. The nonverbal realms. This is where the collective unconscious is. Neptune is the the ocean of oneness that we all dissolve into. And Neptune is dissolution in every sense of the word, right? Neptune is where all of our conceptions dissolve. It is where we merge in oneness with the universe. It is also where we are dissolute. So depression lives here, drug addiction, drunkenness are lower forms of Neptune. Evolved forms of Neptune are poetry. This is the poet E.E. Cummings, who was also like a complete hottie. So I really liked this picture of E.E. Cummings for Neptune. And I also chose him because, you know, he was a bit of a Uranian poet as well as being Neptunian, right? The real creative flow, just almost to the point of seeming crazy, is definitely a thing with Neptune. It's think about the poets and mystics who are living so much in that creative flow that it's hard for them to make sense in our rational day-to-day world. The world of Neptune is undifferentiated. Undifferentiated. There can be a sadness with Neptune. That's why I brought Marilyn in for a couple of reasons. First of all, because Neptune is also where our illusions, delusions, and projections live. So the whole entertainment industry is Neptunian because it creates an illusion. And it creates a space for us to project our desires and ideals onto. So cultural icons who are Neptunian often have this kind of the same quality that Marilyn had, where her humanity was forgotten in everything that the culture projected onto her. So being a Neptunian icon is sometimes a really difficult life to live because you're receiving the illusions, delusions, and projections of the audience, and the self can be lost and dissolved in those Neptunian depths, and there can be a sadness to that. But then also we can have, you know, great success as an artist and be a groundbreaking poet. So I felt like there was space for both of these icons. No one but the rain has such small hands. Yeah, I love it that you have E.E. Cummings just available to you in your mind. That's beautiful. Yeah, he was such a Neptunian, also Uranian. So there we are at that outermost, or almost outermost, was until the 1930s, outermost limit of the solar system. We dissolve into oneness with Neptune. So think about the places in your life where you dissolve, where you are dissolute, or where you merge in spiritual oneness, where you create, where you are deluded, where you are in a magical and beautiful illusion that helps you to create, where you live in a wordless creative world.